Welcome back to Cyber City of Galilee DSM&Me on this Thursday, November 18th. This is the feast of two great saints, but actually not exactly the saints, but they're basilicas, which is an interesting thing in the church. Who else would celebrate a building? We do. Why? Because of what that building represents. First of all, it holds the Eucharist because it's a Catholic church, and Basilica, it's a very big Catholic church. And in that tabernacle rests God himself, who was given out to all of us in Holy Communion. And so, of course, we're going to celebrate that building because it's the house of God. But today, it is the dedication of the churches, the basilicas of Saints Peter and St. Paul. St. Peter, you know, is the Vatican. And so St. Peter actually was martyred somewhere on Vaticano Hill, and probably right around the area where they eventually took his body secretly to bury him. And we also know that under the Vatican, and as well as certainly under portions of Rome, there are the secret catacombs. And so the saints through the ages had great devotion because we know that many of the martyrs were actually buried in these catacombs. Now, St. Peter's bones have been found, and you can actually take a tour when you go to Rome if you sign up for it about a year or 2 years in advance. It's called the Scali, and this particular tour is very, very popular because you go down underneath the Vatican, which is a huge church, which has been built in several different stages because Constantine began it back again in the 3rd, 4th century, and then eventually it burned, and then others were built. But the relics of St. Peter have remained there, and you can get so close to them and see the bones of St. Peter. I know, it's just, you just about think you're gonna have a heart attack. Okay, and then if you get a bus and you go outside the walls of Rome, and you actually go to a little place called Tre Fontani. Tre Fontani means that there are 3 fountains. Why 3 fountains? Because this is the place where St. Paul was martyred. And he was martyred actually outside the walls because he was a Roman citizen. And so you couldn't shed Roman blood within the Roman territory. So they had to take him outside. And so they cut off his head, he was beheaded, and it bounced 3 times, says the tradition. And there are 3 separate fountains right here where we have the largest church, second only to St. Peter's, which is St. Paul, outside the walls of Rome. And so there we have these 2 huge basilicas that the whole world knows and loves and venerates, St. Peter and St. Paul. And these 2 represent 2 of the greatest leaders at the very beginning of the church. St. Paul, an educated, well put together man who ordered some of the persecutions of the church before his conversion, and St. Peter, a smelly old fisherman whom God chose to make the rock of Peter in the beginning of the church. So they are the original, I kind of think, odd couple. And in so many different ways, they represent to us that God's heart is big enough to take every one of us with all our uniquenesses and the positives and the negatives that make us up and love us infinitely. Blessed feast of the dedications of the churches of Saints Peter and St. Paul.